We are very pleased to be joined by Joyce Chang. She is the chair of global research at JP Morgan Chase, also named one of finance's 25 most powerful women by American Banker, going back basically a decade. Joyce, I know you don't do a lot of TV, so we love having you on Worldwide Exchange, and you truly have a global view. Thank you for coming on. 2022 just seems so hard to predict given all the things that we are seeing with COVID, with Omicron, with supply chain issues, with political issues in Russia, Ukraine. Let's go country by country, but right now, how do you see the world shaping up next year?
Well, great to be with you, Brian. It's still a year that's above trend for growth globally. And we do see that China's going to slow down in growth, but actually that Europe is going to outperform a recovery in Japanese growth. But even in China, the worst is behind us as far as what we saw in the third quarter. Now, higher inflation is still going to be with us, but we really see this as more of an inflation rotation rather than sustained higher inflation across the board. I think some of the supply chain shocks will be solved, but we will then have still concerns about inflation in other areas, wage inflation, housing services, and energy prices, where I do think there's more upside pressure. But on the growth story, I think it's still above trend. I think the message from the Fed was one that the markets expected. It lent credibility to the Fed recognizes what the challenges are that they need to navigate. So it's still a very positive year for equities ahead. But I think it's one of those years where the U.S. is not necessarily the outperformer. I think international markets can outperform in 2022.
Yeah, the U.S. has been a moneymaker for so long. I understand that your clients and our viewers, they sort of get in these habits like, hey, if it doesn't stop working, why not just ride it out? But we're starting to see valuations near some of the higher ends historically. As you look around the world, do you see markets like a China, like other markets, Japan, ex-Asia, where the valuations and the growth stories and the expectations just simply seem, and it's no knock on America, but they just seem more reasonable or rational?
No, I think that, for the S&P 500, we have 50-50 as the target. So that's still a good return, but it's a more moderate return. We are really looking at overall emerging markets equities really to play catch up in 2022 for the whole MSCI EM up 18%. But within that, we actually think that China will outperform after a really challenging 2021. And I think the bottom really was the third quarter for growth, where we saw in China a 3.3% contraction. We also saw all of the difficulties in the energy sector and the property sector. And I think you're going to see more stabilization in China, but also very attractive valuations here. So particularly, after the Olympics, I think that you could really see sentiment improve. We see that the worst is probably behind us in some of the default numbers in the property sector, as well as the decline we had in growth in the third quarter. I'm looking at 4-5% sequential growth over the fourth quarter and the first quarter of 2022.
What about the headline risk on regulation, government overstep, government overreach, that idea of the iron fist versus the velvet glove? I mean, you wake up one morning and you hear that the Chinese government has, forced out a CEO or done this. Do you have to kind of put a valuation discount on China because there could be a DD, like a delisting risk? Well, I mean, look, China is on a common prosperity agenda right now, which goes to 2035, 2049. So this is not going to go away. And we saw recently at the Economic Work Conference that they really clarified that common prosperity means for China making the cake bigger and better before slicing the cake, is the way that they put it. And I think what this means is that the central government will aim to provide more what they call precise provisioning. I think that translates as some regulation in some of the basic public services, including education, healthcare, and housing to continue. So I don't see them shifting away. So they set the rules in 2021. They're going to implement them in 2022. And that means that you do have to be selective at what you look at in China right now. The common prosperity is going to help certain sectors. It's going to help, I think, on the cyclicals, industrials, materials, on also some of the new electric vehicle supply chain, the renewables, a lot of the automation. A lot of what's driving common prosperity is China's demographics. There is
real concern about that. But I think you're going to want to be more underweight still on property, healthcare. Gaming, I think, is another sector that could be more vulnerable. So I think that China will you're not going to see a reversal in how they're directing housing policy or decarbonization or the tech regulation. But I think you will see cyclicals and some of this consumer discretionary supported here.
Okay, and one of my predictions, which by the way are just done for fun, they're not investment advice, you actually give real investment advice, is about Japan. And I was looking at the valuations, 15 times earnings on the Nikkei versus 26 forward on the S&P 500. And I think Japan, and other people, you've written about it, Jeffries has written about it, others like it. Are you bullish on Japan as well as China?
We are bullish on Japan, and that's largely off of the growth numbers. I mean, we had Japan at 3.7% growth last year. I mean, that's like around where we have U.S. growth. I think that's going to be the best economic growth that you've seen since the first year of Abenomics. And so I think a lot of this is just, the savings, the consumer spending that we see in place in Japan. But the growth story actually is one that in the fourth quarter is really going to post one of the strongest growth numbers that we're seeing globally. So I do see that consumer story as coming back, and growth in Japan for where they have been, historically on, one of the high prints in 2022.
Pretty remarkable stuff in a nation that's had about 4 or 5 recessions in the last 20 to 25 years. Joyce Chang, Chair of Global Research at JP Morgan Chase. We love your global views. We appreciate you coming on. Have a happy new year, Joyce. Best to you and your clients and your family and everybody else. We hope to talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, and happy holidays to you and to everyone.
Thank you very much.